My name is Erica Lang. I'm 29, and until a week ago, I was a financial analyst at Centurion Capital in downtown Chicago. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't the type to play office politics or schmooze at corporate happy hours. I just did my job, kept my head down, and believed that if I stuck to the truth, worked hard, and followed the rules, things would work out. That was before I found the Harwood files. It started with a series of payment discrepancies, small at first, invoices that didn't match vendor records, wire transfers routed through shell companies that barely existed, names that led nowhere. When I ran due diligence, I flagged them internally, thinking someone had made a clerical mistake. But the deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Over $4.5 million had quietly cycled through fake vendors, bouncing from one offshore entity to another like a bad magic trick. When I brought the evidence to my manager, Martin Kessler, he barely glanced at the folder before leaning back in his chair and giving me this smug, practiced smile. "Those clients are too important, Erica," he said. "You need to let it go." Let it go. Like I was reporting a missing lunch order and not an active laundering scheme. I walked out of his office stunned, and the next morning, I was called into HR. The tone was clinical. Restructuring. Eliminated position. This isn't personal. They even thanked me for my service. I boxed up my things in silence, ignored the sympathetic glances from coworkers who didn't dare ask questions. By noon, I was gone. Erased. But the part that stung the most wasn't the firing. It was coming home. I walked through the door, still, wearing my blazer, still in shock, and my mom, God bless her, just looked up from folding laundry and sighed. "What did you do, Erica?" she asked. "You always act like you're smarter than everyone else. Maybe this is a lesson." "No." "Hug, no. Are you okay?" Just quiet judgment wrapped in disappointment. I nodded, said nothing, and went to my room. Because how do you explain to someone that you were fired for telling the truth? That doing the right thing got you labeled a threat? That night, I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling and made myself a promise. They thought I'd walk away quietly. They were wrong. I spent the next 2 days in a fog. No emails to check, no spreadsheets to drown in, just silence. I'd wake up, sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold, and try to piece together how my life had collapsed in under 24 hours. My phone barely buzzed, except for one text from a former coworker that said, "Sorry to hear. Restructuring sucks." That was it. 2 years of loyalty summed up in a shrug, but somewhere between the numbness and the shame, something in me hardened. They'd kicked me out and branded me as disposable. Even my own mother looked at me like I was the problem. But I still had one thing they didn't: the truth. Before I left the office, I'd forwarded everything to my personal drive. Every spreadsheet, every flagged transaction, every internal memo that looked even slightly off. I knew it might get me in trouble later, but at that point, I didn't care. I opened my laptop, pulled up the files, and started organizing them like puzzle pieces. Patterns began to emerge. The same vendor names, same account numbers, same timing every month. It wasn't random. It was precise, deliberate. One client's name kept showing up more than the others: the Harwood Trust. They weren't just another client. They were elite. Their portfolio was confidential. Even at my level, I wasn't supposed to access half of what I'd seen. But someone had slipped up. I followed the trails of money to shell companies registered offshore, many of which traced back to entities with ties to Jonathan Harwood, the elusive CEO behind the trust. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just internal corruption. This was something much, much bigger and worse. Jonathan Harwood was close friends with my boss, Martin. I remembered the way Martin had once bragged about a weekend golf retreat in the Caymans. "Private jet, big players," he'd said. At the time, I thought he was just showing off. Now, I wasn't so sure. The more I uncovered, the more obvious. It became that I wasn't fired for poor performance. I was fired because I was a liability. Someone who had seen too much, asked too many questions, and wasn't naive enough to ignore red flags. They wanted me gone because I'd connected dots they didn't want connected. And as I sat there, staring at the data laid bare on my screen, something shifted. The sting of being dismissed, the shame of being looked down on, it all began to fade. Because I finally saw it clearly. I wasn't the one who failed. I was the only one doing her damn job. They thought they could shut me up. They thought I'd feel too small, too outmatched to fight back. They forgot one thing. I understand numbers, and numbers don't lie. I didn't have power, a platform, or even a damn job. But I had data, and I had one name in mind: Carmen Ruiz. Carmen wasn't someone you just called out of the blue. She worked in internal compliance at a different firm now, but we'd met once during a joint audit project, and she left an impression. The kind of woman who read contracts like court indictments and could sniff out fraud faster than a bloodhound at a butcher shop. She was also known for being allergic to corporate BS, and famously told a senior VP during a meeting, "If your math's fuzzy, I'm not the one who's blind." I emailed her everything. Didn't sugarcoat it. Just the facts, the patterns, the accounts. 20 minutes later, she called. No hello. Just, "Jesus, Erica. Are you still breathing? Or has Centurion buried you in the woods yet?" I laughed for the first time in days. Technically still breathing, barely. She invited me to her office the next day. Old school. Folders, highlighters, a whiteboard filled with diagrams like she was mapping out a criminal empire, which, in retrospect, wasn't far off. We spent 6 hours cross-checking everything. Not only did my findings hold up, but she spotted 3 additional client groups using the same laundering structure, each tied to different senior managers. At one point, she looked up from a document and said, "You realize what this is, right? This isn't just fraud. It's institutionalized money laundering dressed in a pantsuit." Then she smirked, circled a vendor name, and muttered, "And this one's so fake it might as well be wearing a mustache and calling itself Señor Laundry." I couldn't help it. I laughed so hard I almost spilled coffee on my laptop. By the time we were done, we had a digital mountain of evidence: transactions, shell corporations, internal communications, metadata timestamps, all pointing to the same conclusion. Centurion wasn't just complicit, they were the engine. Now came the scary part. Carmen handed me a card. Agent Dana Monroe, Financial Crimes Division, FBI. "She's the real deal," Carmen said. "But once this is in her hands, there's no pulling back. You ready for that?" I wasn't sure, but I nodded anyway. We encrypted the files and sent them off that night. Subject line: confidential. Active laundering patterns linked to Centurion. Capital and affiliates. Within 12 hours, Agent Monroe responded. Simple, direct. "Please make time to speak. In person. Today." I stared at the screen for a long moment. This was it. The moment the quiet part became loud. The part where the girl they called too naive to understand power pulled the first thread and started unraveling the whole damn suit. They thought I was gone. They had no idea I was just getting warmed up. Exactly 1 week after we sent the files to Agent Monroe, a thick manila envelope showed up at my apartment, stamped with the icy formality of a corporate law firm. Inside, a cease and desist letter from Centurion Capital's legal team, accusing me of theft of proprietary information, defamation, and breach of confidentiality. You know, the usual cocktail of intimidation tactics. They wanted me to return all documents, aka delete everything I knew, and sign a written statement retracting my baseless accusations. At the bottom was a little cherry on top, a gentle reminder that failure to comply would result in all legal remedies being pursued to the fullest extent. Translation: We're scared, but we'll pretend we're the ones with the power. I didn't even flinch. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. No caller ID. I picked up anyway. "Erica," came Martin Kessler's voice, all syrup and sleaze. "You must know this has gone too far." I didn't say anything. Just let him talk. He always filled silence with excuses. "You're emotional." Understandably. "But this isn't the way. You're putting yourself at risk. And frankly, you're putting others at risk too. Clients, jobs, reputations. Is that what you want?" He paused like he expected me to apologize. Then he continued. "Look, I can talk to HR. We can figure something out. There's a spot opening on the compliance team. Quiet, no spotlight. You come back, and this all goes away. Just be reasonable." I smiled. Cold. Quiet. "Let me get this straight," I said. "You're offering me a deal after you fired me, smeared my name, and tried to legally muzzle me?" "Erica, be smart," he said sharply, the mask slipping. "Don't let pride ruin your future." That's when I hit him back, calm as ever. "My future isn't built on laundered money and fake invoices, Martin. But yours might be." He went silent. And then, click. Call ended. I stared at the screen for a moment, my pulse steady. That was the last time I ever heard his voice. They thought the legal threats would scare me. They thought dangling crumbs of false forgiveness would lure me back. But what they didn't understand was, I wasn't trying to come back. I was trying to burn the whole rotting system down, and I had already lit the match. It only took one leak, just one anonymous envelope, digital copies of selected transactions, shell company records, and a few carefully chosen internal emails, landing in the inboxes of 3 major financial reporters. I didn't send it. But someone did. Maybe Carmen, maybe Agent Monroe. All I know is, by Thursday morning, Centurion Capital was a trending headline on 3 platforms with the words fraud, FBI, and money laundering in bold print. The media storm was instant. TV anchors dissected every acronym. LinkedIn became a graveyard of "We Stand for Transparency" posts. Clients began pulling out. Employees stopped showing up. And then, like thunder after lightning, the FBI raided Centurion's offices. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't gentle. And it sure as hell wasn't a routine check, no matter how PR tried to spin it. Meanwhile, my inbox, once dead silent, lit up. Recruiters, journalists, former coworkers who'd ghosted me weeks ago, suddenly wanted to check in. But the one message that stood out came from Veritas Partners, a global financial firm known for actually walking the walk when it came to ethics. The subject line was short: "We'd like to talk." The interview felt different. Real questions, real conversations, no fake smiles or glassy eyes. They didn't tiptoe around Centurion either. "We know what happened," the compliance director said, folding her hands. "We want someone like you, someone who doesn't flinch when it counts." I started the following Monday as Director of Compliance Initiatives. New desk, new view, new team. I didn't need to prove I was brave. I just had to keep being the woman they hired, the one who told the truth when it wasn't safe. Back at Centurion, chaos reigned. Executives resigned for personal reasons. Martin vanished from social media. Emergency meetings were leaked. And word on the street was that 1/3 of the leadership had lawyered up. And me? I wasn't out for revenge anymore. That part was done. Now, I was just focused on building something better, something solid. Not for applause, not for headlines. Just because the industry needs people who remember what integrity actually means. 3 months after the raid, the FBI held a press conference that stopped the entire finance world in its tracks. Cameras flashing, reporters elbowing for position, The spokesperson stepped up and dropped the bomb. Centurion Capital knowingly falsified financial documents and facilitated large-scale international money laundering. No more vague statements. No more carefully worded denials. They said it plainly, loudly, and publicly. And just like that, the facade shattered. Martin Kessler was arrested at a private airstrip outside Dallas, trying to board a jet registered under an alias. Jonathan Harwood, the billionaire shadow behind the Harwood Trust, was taken from his penthouse in handcuffs. 2 senior execs from Centurion followed hours later. No more golf trips, no more exclusive dinners, just mugshots and a sea of legal charges. The firm itself? Dissolved by court order. Its remaining assets frozen, pending full investigation. Everything that had once made it powerful, its name, reputation, elite client list, reduced to cautionary footnotes in business school. Meanwhile, Carmen Ruiz, my battle-hardened ally, went one step further. She submitted the final tranche of documentation to the State Attorney General's office, initiating a nationwide probe into affiliated firms, shell companies, and banking institutions that had turned a blind eye for too long. At Veritas, the mood was electric, not smug, focused. Every department took the news as both validation and warning. This is what happens when you choose silence over accountability. My boss called me into her office the day after the press conference. She didn't say much, just handed me a newspaper with Martin's face on the front and said, "You were the first domino." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. I felt seen. Not as a whistleblower, not as the girl who got fired, but as someone who didn't back down when it mattered. For once, justice didn't crawl. It thundered. And it reminded everyone in the room, especially the ones who once dismissed me with smirks and warnings. I wasn't just right. I was undeniable. 6 months later, I walk into Veritas every morning, not with fear, but with purpose. My name is on the door now, Director of Investigative Compliance, and I lead a team of people who know that doing the right thing isn't always comfortable, but it's always worth it. We've rebuilt an internal culture where transparency isn't just a slogan, it's a standard. My office isn't fancy, but my door is always open, and people actually knock because they trust what's behind it. At home, things are quieter. My mom doesn't say much about what happened anymore. She follows the headlines now, reads business news, sometimes even brags about me when she thinks I'm not listening. But she never apologized, and I've stopped waiting for it. Because, here's the truth, I don't need validation from people who only show up after the storm has passed. I know what I stood for. I know who I am. A few weeks ago, one of our interns, young, sharp, a little nervous, lingered after a team meeting. She asked, "Do you ever regret it? Not walking away when you had the chance?" I paused, smiled, and looked her straight in the eye. "If you choose silence, you've already chosen the wrong side." She nodded like she understood. I hope she did, because that's how it begins. With one person brave enough to see the truth and not blink, I've learned that some victories don't come with applause. They come with peace, with knowing you didn't fold when it would have been easier to disappear. I sleep well at night, and not because I won, but because I refuse to lose myself. And if you've made it to the end of this story, maybe you needed to hear that too. So tell me, have you ever stood up when everyone else stayed silent? Drop your story, or just your thoughts, in the comments. Like this if it hit home, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us. Doing what's right will never go out of style.